Hi everybody. Today we're going to talk about qualitative case study research design. It's a little repetitive to say qualitative case study research design, but I did want to make sure that my focus was clear, that we're not going to talk about qualitative research design in general. We're going to focus on the case study, which is what you're going to do for this project. And I like this quote by E.L. Doctorow. Writing is like driving a car at night. You can only see as far as your headlights, but you can make the whole trip that way. And that's a lot like qualitative research. You begin and you're thinking about emergent design, but you don't know where you're going to land. Okay? You don't have a hypothesis and prove or disprove it. You're exploring, you're on a journey, which makes qualitative research so much fun. So let's get into this and see what you're going to do for your study. So I just pulled from the syllabus the requirements for the study. Okay, this is not for the proposal, but I thought it would be helpful to take a look at what the end product is going to be. Okay? And then you'll have a really good sense about why the proposal asks for the information it does. Okay? So here's what you're going to turn in at the end of the semester. You're going to turn in a short case study, no more than 25 pages. Final report should include the following: introduction and contextualization of the problem or issue, including a clear statement of the purpose of the study and the research question. We're going to talk about quite a few of these things because they will be elements of the proposal as well. So I'm just going to kind of read through this pretty quickly. To the philosophical assumptions that drove the choices you made in the study, and we're going to go into that quite a bit detail later on, including the positionality of the researcher and the methods used in the study. Okay. The next one, presentation of the findings in the case, including the presentation of data that answers and or addresses the research question. So here, that's not going to go in the proposal, okay, because that's something you're going to get later in the semester after you gather your data. Interpretation of the findings, what do these findings mean? Are there implications for practice? Again, is not going to go in the proposal, except for there is a question of what do you hope to learn. Okay? Reflections on your experience and problems you encounter while collecting, analyzing, and reporting your data. And most of that's going to come from your reflexive journal. You have that requirement to keep a reflexive journal once you start collecting data. And if you're regular about keeping that, you're just going to pull from some of the most salient points, things you learned, lessons learned or successes from there, and put it in that section. Okay? And then again, here you'll interview 4 to 7 participants. Some of you might find you can do a few more. 4 to 7 is low for a case study, but this is just a practice study. It's not publishable anyway, and it's not shareable. So I wanted to make sure that rather than scrambling through 10 to 12, 14 participants, rather than just hustling and getting way more data than you can figure out, I'd go ahead and have you do maybe longer interviews with 4 to 7 and really understand how to go through your data, find themes that emerge. It may be a little more difficult to find themes that emerge with the lower number of participants, but so 4 is not going to probably yield you enough, and 7, yeah, it'll probably be fine. Okay, so think about that as you start your interviews. And honestly, in emergent design, you'll know. Okay, if you start your interviews and they turn out to be an hour and a half interviews, that's pretty in depth. You're going to get quite a bit of information from each person. If your interviews ended up being 20 minutes a piece and you only do 4, you're not going to have enough. So those are the kinds of things you want to think about. And of course, I'm going through your topics now, and then I would encourage you to focus on something bounded and limited. Bounded by are all people part of an organization, or all people have experienced something, and we'll talk about that a little bit later too. And I'd encourage you not to do something to do with your professional life, because you want to make sure that you're not crossing any kind of like ethical things. Plus, we tend to take on too much. We tend to take on a year-long study, not a month-long study. Let's move on and see what this thing's going to look like in the proposal. So your practice study proposal is due June 18th, 2 pages. Okay, super short. I said you can single space, but you don't have to. I think you can fit everything into a double-spaced 2-page paper. So write the proposal in paragraph form. Even though I'm listing what the elements are, you're going to need to write that in paragraph form. Just like, this is what I want to do, this is why, and you're going to develop those into paragraphs. And include the following elements. What issue or problem are you interested in exploring? What's the importance of that issue or problem? You don't need to do a literature review, okay? And you don't need to do a literature review in your practice study either, okay? We'll talk about that later. What's the purpose of the study? What's the research question? What's your research design, including the philosophical assumptions that drove that design? What's your proposed data collection and analysis strategy? You want to include your population, your sampling strategy, observations, other ways of gathering data, interviewing, and data coding analysis. I'm going to tell you right now, you're not going to have much to say on that. We're going to study that later in the semester. Okay? I have an example you might just want to copy and paste. Okay? So I want to acknowledge that in emergent design, your study might change along the way, but you need a blueprint. Okay? You need a plan moving forward so that it's not a hot mess. And we want to make sure that your plan is consistent with the practices of qualitative research. And you have such a short amount of time to work on this that I want to make sure that you're not taking on a challenge that you can't possibly finish by the end of the term. So I'm going to go through every single one of those elements of the proposal, but let's start with ontology. What's ontology got to do with it, and why does she keep talking about ontology? And one of the things that I want to bring up is from the conversations that I've been hearing, I think there may be a little bit of confusion still between, what's quant, what's qual, and I don't want you to see these as enemies. Let's just look at what's at the root of the difference, okay? In quantitative research, we're looking at a single reality, a single view of reality. So if we're looking at enough people, if our population and our sample size from our population, if we're using inferential statistics, if we're looking at that, we can draw conclusions, okay, about what's the best way to teach reading to young children. Okay, that might be something that we would do with a big N. It could be replicable, it could be generalizable. So the microscope here is focused on the whole thing. We're looking at a broad picture of what is common and true. All right, so what's that? That's a banana. I recognize a banana. Everybody recognizes a banana. It's a banana. Okay? So let's look at qualitative research. Qualitative researchers acknowledge multiple realities. Just because many people perceive something, or many people respond to a particular medication, that doesn't mean that there aren't voices that are not being heard, right? Particularly in institutions that are, institutions that reward privilege in certain population categories, or populations that are on the margin and their voices may not be heard. Okay. So what we're going to do in qualitative research is we're going to look at the small things. We're going to take that microscope down and look at the details. So the microscope is sharply focused to show individuality and difference, and here we are. That's a banana skin under a microscope. Looks very different from the whole, and you can see all the tiny parts. Okay? So now let's talk about ontology, and let's talk about what that has to do with the case study. So we're going to apply it directly to case studies. So ontology, the multiple views of reality. So we're going to look at the particular, not the general, to understand that there are multiple realities, multiple perceptions, and not just one view of reality. Okay? My reality, the way I see things, sometimes we all say, well, why don't you see it my way? Okay? Well, what's fun about qualitative research is you want to see how other people see it, okay? Sometimes people will tell you things, and you go, no, that couldn't be. And then you understand what their perceptions are, and you go, wow, I've never seen it that way before. Okay. Epistemology, how knowledge is made known. So case study is going to focus on a particular group of people who have experienced something in common and are contextually connected. Contextually connected probably it may be a vague way of saying it, but I like it because you're going to have put them all in a boundary, okay, within a boundary, because your case study is bound, okay. The single case bounds participants by phenomenon or time or space or some kind of context. Axiology, okay, the values that a qualitative researcher brings to the case study. The researcher is an instrument. The researcher is the instrument, okay? The researcher is going to acknowledge their positionality. The researcher is going to be committed to emergent design and not beginning with the end in mind. And the researcher is going to be committed to reflexivity. Okay? Methodology, how the case study will be carried out, data collection, analysis strategies, and the point here is the methodology. You're going to design that methodology to be consistent with ontology, epistemology, and axiology. Okay? Well, what is that? That's great, but what is that going to look like in my proposal? I'm glad you asked that question. So, we're going to take the elements of the proposal, and I'm going to provide examples for you because I have thought of, if I were in your class and I were given this assignment, these are the decisions I would have made, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to look at that blueprint, and we're going to look at the issue or problem you're looking at exploring. We're going to look at the importance of the issue, the purpose of the study, the research question, the research design, and the proposed data collection and analysis, okay? So we're going to look at all of those, and I'm going to give you an example from my pretend case study, my pretend practice case study. So I was thinking, well, if I were you, I just got back from a songwriting camp in Red River, New Mexico. It was called the Red River Songwriters Camp. And so I thought, wow, I'm going to have access to all these people, all these wonderful people, and I'm passionate about songwriting. I'm trying to write every day and learn about it, and I did a lot of it when I was younger, gave it up for my day job, and now I'm kind of back to it. And so I've got all these people, and I've got access to all of them. So from a practical standpoint, this would be the best topic I could choose for my practice study. So my example study that I'm going to talk about today is how songwriters view the songwriting creating process. Okay? Now, I have lots of choices, tons of choices to make. All right? That's pretty general. How songwriters view the songwriting creative process. But, I want to tell you a little bit about the group. On the back row are all the campers. There were 10 of us, and we ranged in age from 17 to, I'm not going to reveal. There were people who were just writing their first song, and there was one person who is about to cut an album. Album is that's still the way we refer to it, or CD. And on the front row are the mentors. So if you know Americana music or Texas country or Texas folk, you'll recognize some of these names. Drew Kennedy is in the Philly shirt on the front. Next to him is Texas country artist, songwriter Josh Grider. Walt Wilkins, he's, if you've never heard of him, just be aware that he's written a lot of the songs you've heard on the radio. Susan Gibson, an amazing songwriter. She wrote Wide Open Spaces that the Dixie Chicks made very famous, and Kelly McWee, who's an amazing artist. So I thought, I'm looking at my population. I'm looking at a picture of my population right now, and so are you. Okay? So I can make a lot of different choices. I could interview the campers. That would be my population. I could interview just the mentors and then do some snowball sampling. I might say, hey, who else could I talk to? Hey, Drew, who else should I talk to? Well, you ought to talk to Adam Carroll. Oh, yeah, I know Adam Carroll. I should talk to him. And I'll go talk to him and add that. I could mix and match the populations and see, should I interview maybe 10 of the 15, okay, and see how that would work. So what I'm playing with here is, what are my boundaries, okay? So if I mix and match the population, then that would be pretty cool, but some people, if they're writing their first song, they may not be able to give me the insight that I'm looking for that I could get with a more experienced songwriter. So I might say, you know what, I'm going to mix the mentors and the participants, but I'm only going to interview participants who have, I don't know, X number of songs, finished songs, or X number of years of experience writing songs, or something like that. So that narrows it down to maybe 4 in the group or 5 in the group. In addition to my 5, I've got 9 participants and I'm good to go. So I've got tons of choices here, okay? It would be fun also to do a study on the beginning songwriters, okay? What's your process? What are you thinking, okay? What do you go through? What's held you back if you've been doing this a long time? So I've got my population there. So I know that's a long slide, but having a picture of my proposed population really actually has helped me think through, how am I going to put this together? And what kind of choices am I going to make in this single case study to bind it, okay? So that when I get my data, I'll be able to have see themes emerge, and I'll be able to have a rich, it may not be as big a focus, but it's going to be a richer focus. So you're going to have to go wide, go narrow, go wide, go narrow in making your decisions until you hit a sweet spot. So here are my examples for my particular practice study, okay? And you've got a note or a little asterisk there. So here are this is what I might put in the proposal, but there's a little caveat down there, and it says, these examples are provided to give you an ideas on how to get started. Some of the examples in this presentation would need development in a real proposal. So you're going to probably spend, quite a bit of time. I don't know, 3/4 of a page or so. I don't know. I hate to be mathematical about it. I just don't know. But on talking about the problem you're interested in exploring, and also the importance or issue of a problem. And honestly, I've got a couple sentences here, but the rambling I did on the previous slide, I put most of that in that little intro part, because I want to contextualize the issue. Why am I interested in this? What's going on? So here's an example sentence though. I'm interested in how people get ideas for songs and how they write them, including their sources of inspiration and the development of finished songs. Okay? Now look how general that is. That's just a topic. That's just something I'm looking at. Okay? I'm going to whittle that down. I'm going to make it more narrow, but for now I'm going to leave it just as it is. Why is this important? Why should we read a study like this? Who cares? Okay? So, why do we care? The creative process is hard to define and often elusive. And many people who start writing songs or any artistic endeavor often start in earnest and then become frustrated by the difficulty of the process, or become blocked and unable to write. In addition, making writing a priority in a life filled with demands and expectations often dissuade novice writers. And I think a lot of us are dissuaded from our creative endeavors because of our daily life and the demands on us and how difficult it is to sustain. So, maybe I'd put some of that in there, maybe I wouldn't, maybe I've already said it enough. Okay, so this is going to take up a little time in your proposal to contextualize this. It also helps you think through your methodology. So taking a little time this week to think about these two things are really going to help you set up your blueprint. Let's talk about the next part, which is also going to take a little bit of time to think through. So what's the purpose? Why do this study? And what do you hope to discover? So the purpose of the study is to explore the perceptions of experienced songwriters. Oh, I've already made a decision here, haven't I? Okay. So the perceptions of experienced songwriters of the songwriting process, including their sources of inspiration and the development of finished songs. Although the creative process is hard to define and often elusive, experienced songwriters have developed processes that work for them and have allowed them to produce written, finished songs on a regular basis. And both experienced and novice songwriters could benefit from sharing ideas about the creative songwriting process. So I'm a little hinky-dinky about my population there. I seem to be waffling between experienced songwriters and novice songwriters. And honestly, what I hope to gain is not generalization. Okay, you don't generalize in this qualitative study. So generalization would be, I want to know how experienced songwriters perceive their processes because that's the way every songwriter, that's the process of every songwriter. And if you do that process, it will work for you. That's generalization. That's not what we're all about here. Okay? What we're doing is we're looking at the particulars. Right? We're looking at the particulars of how each of these individuals perceive process, how they perceive inspiration. And it would be great to know that. Okay? But we're not going to say all songwriters are like this, or that's going to work for every songwriter. All right? But to gain insight into that and understand that as a descriptive thing would definitely, I'd definitely be interested in that as an amateur songwriter. And I think experienced songwriters learn from each other as well. So here's a research question, and it's only one. Okay, it's rich, it's pretty big, but it's one. How do experienced songwriters perceive their creative songwriting process, including inspiration and development of their songs? So it's only one question. Now that one question is going to determine your interview questions. We haven't written the interview questions. We're going to talk about that pretty soon. But you want to get a really good, clean research question. Then your interview questions, every single interview question should get at an element of the research question. That's how to make a clean design. So that when you gather your data, when you have your interviews, when you go back and you look at your data, things are going to lead back to answering the question. Now notice we don't start with the end in mind. We're open. How do they? I don't know. Let's find out in the study. Research design, including the philosophical assumptions. So I had a question about this. A couple people asked me a question. What does that even mean? So let me give you a few examples. Let's be very straightforward. I will employ emergent design in answering my research question. Now, gosh, Candace, isn't that obvious? I'm doing qualitative research. Well, what is that going to look like? I'm going to employ emergent design. Okay. Now, hopefully that rings true in all of the other elements in your proposal, but saying it, you might follow that up by saying, I might need to adjust along the way. Okay. Second, I am the research instrument and will be conducting interviews with participants and making written field observations. Okay, so you're actually doing the observations. You're acknowledging that you're the research instrument. Okay, you're not hiding behind a lab coat. You go, no, I'm here. Okay. What's my positionality? I am a songwriter and as so act as a participant researcher. I'm an insider and part of the amateur songwriting community, although my primary participants will be professional and semi-professional songwriters. Here I'm limiting my scope. So here I'm saying, no, I'm not going to interview the novice songwriters on the back row. I might interview just the 5 on the front row who are professionals and maybe the 4 on the back row who have written a lot of songs. They may not do it as their day job, but they're pretty far along in the process. Okay? That will help me limit my scope and put another boundary. It puts a bound on my cakes. And then here's another one. I will be reflexive during my journey and will keep a reflexive journal of my own perceptions and thoughts during the data collection and analysis process. You're just committing to be a reflexive researcher and saying, I'm gonna question myself. I'm gonna reflect on what went well, what didn't go well, where I'm going from here, and then also commit you to emergent design. So they all work together. So data collection. All right. So here's a possibility. I'm using a single case study methodology to Study experienced songwriters' perceptions of the songwriting process, including the inspiration and development of a complete song. So, single case study, that's a method, okay? I mean, that's a strategy, okay? So, I will use purposive sampling, interviewing 5 experienced songwriters at a songwriting camp. Now, is it convenient for me to do that? Yeah, but really, I'm going to do it because we're all part of the same experience as well, and that could also bind us. Okay, so and in your record of study, in your dissertation, you don't use convenient sampling because it is convenient for you. Your advisor will bristle at that. But the idea here is like, I've got all these people in this, and we're all experiencing the same event. We're all in the same place. So maybe I wouldn't then, use snowball sampling. So here I'm saying next, I intend to employ snowball sampling for my initial population to increase my population sample to 7 to 10 songwriters. I don't know. That may or may not work. In a commitment to emergent design, I might say, jeepers, then my observation notes are going to be different. Okay, that kind of leads to the next point. I'm getting ahead of myself. This case study will be comprised of information gained by face-to-face structured and unstructured interviews. Semi-structured is probably a better way of putting that, and that's probably what I would do. Actually say semi-structured interviews, and that's probably the preferred. Unstructured interviews, boy, you got to be pretty darn good to do that, and structured doesn't give you a flexibility. Observation of behaviors and interactions between the songwriters at the camp and reflection of my own behavior as a participant at the camp. Okay. Now that I'm bounding it by that event, not sure if it's going to work to do snowball sampling, but that's part of emergent design, and that's why I'm being reflexive even in my thinking about my study and talking about it with you. I want to show you not just what it's like to, gosh, what text should I put in my proposal, but how am I going to be thinking about this and how is that going to change? Here's your next example. I will use handwritten field notes to record interviews and observations. No recording devices will be used. Of course, you're not allowed to use recording devices based on our IRB class project guidelines. And so you could, you take that almost verbatim and put it in, but you might want to, put it in a little more elegantly. You all don't know about data analysis yet and how that's going to work. This is in general what you're going to be doing, so if you want to just put this in as a placeholder, that's fine. Data will be transcribed into electronic transcripts in Microsoft Word and then printed on index cards and coded for thematic categories. So, even if you don't really have a lot in there, I don't want you to read ahead in the text and find out how to do this. It's a lesson that we're going to cover, so I don't want you to worry about it, okay? So just if you have an idea, then just go for the idea. If not, just put something like I've just said, no big deal, okay? Final notes, and I'm going to be very quick about this because I want to keep this to 30 minutes. Don't worry about overlaying a theory like critical race theory or feminist theory in this study, unless you intend to add a whole section with an overview of the theoretical frame and how you're looking at the problem within that frame, and this includes overlaying the theory in the data results section. Have I dissuaded you from that yet? I hope so, because that level of complexity is going to be pretty hard to do in summer school in a short study. All right. I think that, will you need one in your dissertation or record of study if you're doing a qual study? Absolutely. Okay, if you're doing grounded theory, you're going to have a lot of information in your chapter, in the first 3 chapters about how you're going to do that, and then you're going to come out with a theory or a model. That level of complexity is just way too much for your first study. Way too much for what we're trying to accomplish in this Fields Methods class. This is a methods class. You're studying the process of doing it. So we're going to take a naturalistic interpretive view of the day. This is what my suggestion would be. A strong suggestion to just, let's keep it clean, let's keep it simple so you can learn from that first study and then up the complexity from there. Okay? I don't know if you ski. I haven't skied in a long time, but it's like trying that would be like trying a black slope when you've never skied before. You probably want to start on the green slopes and maybe with a lesson. Okay? All right. Next thing, review the text. If you haven't kept up with the text, I would take some time to catch up this week with that text. Make sure you know the elements of the case study. You don't have to read ahead, but there's some samples there. there's a good example, and what I would do is that text really takes the place of some of our lectures. I mean, I don't do very many lectures, but that's why I picked a very straightforward text. Okay, put as much detail in there, anything you're thinking of, so that I can give you advice. And best of luck. I'm looking forward to reading your proposals, and please realize I am always available to you to bounce ideas off of, and also bounce ideas off of each other in Slack. Okay, have a great day.